Okay, welcome. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for Elevating Educator Preparation, the role of EPPs in teacher apprenticeship programs. This webinar is co-hosted by the Association for Advancing Quality in Educator Preparation, AAQEP, and the National Center for Grow Your Own. I'm Carla Warren, Senior Partner with the National Center for Grow Your Own, and I'm coming to this work with a 36-year career in public education, including 20 years in the classroom and 16 years in state education agency work. Prior to retiring from the West Virginia Department of Education last December and joining the National Center for Grow Your Own in January, I had the privilege of working with some incredible teams, including my coworkers at AAQEP, to lead efforts to develop innovative pathways for aspiring educators, focusing on building sustainable partnerships between K-12 schools and post-secondary institutions. I'm excited to bring some of that experience to today's conversation. At this time, I would like to introduce my two colleagues, Dr. Mark Lassell-Peterson and Linda McKee. Mark Lassell-Peterson is the president and CEO of AAQEP, and Mark brings a wealth of experience in education policy, teaching, and accreditation. And what really stands out about his leadership is his passion for building meaningful partnerships. He's all about connecting educator preparation programs with local communities to ensure that all stakeholders grow together through shared practice. His expertise will shape our conversation today about how these collaborative efforts shape the future of educator preparation. Welcome, Mark. I'm also excited to introduce Linda McKee, the Chief Operations Officer at AAQEP. Linda brings a deep knowledge base in educational leadership and accreditation, playing a key role in advancing AAQEP's mission to promote high-quality education through innovative, forward-thinking pathways. Part of Linda's key role is to support members by grounding their work in evidence and tailoring practices to fit local context. Her leadership helps create collaborative frameworks that keep learning continuous and practical, ensuring that educator programs stay connected and impactful. Welcome, Linda. We invite you to join us today for a discussion from the AAQEP and National Center for Grow Your Own perspectives. This webinar will engage conversation around the intersection of apprenticeship and registered teacher apprenticeship and accreditation, ensuring that the quality and rigor of educator preparation is present in the apprenticeship space. Part of the discussion today will center around AAQEP's quality assurance process and how it aligns with apprenticeship frameworks, supporting the development of competent, well-prepared educators. We hope you'll take away a deeper understanding of the educator preparation provider's role in the apprenticeship process and its impact on the future of teacher preparation through registered apprenticeships. As we get started, note that we will stop periodically throughout the conversation to invite questions, but we also will reserve some time at the end of the webinar for comments and questions. Please feel free to submit your questions into the Q&A chat at any time as we roll through the webinar, and we have staff on standby to help support responding to those questions. We want to acknowledge today that our audience may be at different places on the continuum of understanding about teacher registered apprenticeship and or accreditation for educator preparation providers. So we want to begin today by giving a brief overview of both of our organizations and provide you some resources that you can access after the webinar for additional information. So we'll start by giving you some information about the National Center for Grow Your Own. The National Center for Grow Your Own is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that was formed by the Human Capital Leadership Team at the Tennessee Department of Education. Our founder and managing partner, David Donaldson, was instrumental in leading the process to register the K-12 occupation as an apprenticeable occupation with the U.S. Department of Labor. Our vision, our goal, our mission is to provide technical assistance to educator preparation providers, state education agencies, and school districts, local education agencies, who are interested in either expanding or launching Grow Your Own pathways or registered apprenticeships in teaching and or the principalship. The National Center for Grow Your Own served as a co-chair for the national guideline standards for the K-12 teaching registered for the teacher registered apprenticeship. So when you think about, you can advance the slide, Ben. When you think about a grow your own definition, I would venture a guess that if you ask people across the country to define grow your own in teaching, you would get varied responses. And that's really a benefit because that tells us that grow your own programs are being tailored to local context, to community needs, and to the targeted population and demographic. So the National Center for Grow Your Own follows the definition that a Grow Your Own program is a clear, articulated pathway for an aspiring educator to become a teacher and do so for free, get paid to do so. Become a teacher for free and get paid to do so. So we think about a Grow Your Own program as a phase one, a solid foundation, and that leads to phase two, which is a registered apprenticeship program. You might have heard the term job shadowing. You might have heard the term internship or clinical residency. And while all of those elements are generally present in an apprenticeship, we're talking about apprenticeship with a capital A. This is a vetted, industry vetted, approved, registered apprenticeship through the U.S. Department of Labor or a state apprenticeship agency, depending on what state you are working and living in. So a registered apprenticeship is a high quality career pathway that is industry driven, and the employees has specific actors that fall into a registered apprenticeship that is vetted by the U.S. Department of Labor, including the sponsor. There must be an employer, there must be a related instruction provider, and there must be engagement and connection with the state apprenticeship agency and or the U.S. Department of Labor Apprenticeship Office, again, depending on where you live. So there are some key features of a registered apprenticeship program, and Ben will advance for us. Some key features in a capital A registered apprenticeship program through the U.S. Department of Labor include a minimum of 2,000 hours of on-the-job training. There is a progressive wage schedule. There has to be a related instruction component, coursework. There are on-the-job competencies that must be met, and the apprentice must be proficient. There's a strong apprentice journey worker arrangement so that apprentice has a mentor who is guiding them and supporting them. And there is a fair and transparent apprentice selection. So when we think about registered apprenticeship for teaching, if you'd advance the slide, it's really the best of both worlds. An apprenticeship in teaching allows an individual to complete a degree program from an EPP with multiple on-ramps, whether it be an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, or a post-baccalaureate degree. It allows the apprentice to gain hands-on experience in a K-12 classroom under the guidance of a mentor teacher, and it's an earn and learn model where the apprentice is working full-time and earning a progressive wage while doing so. We need to remember that the apprenticeship occupation has only been in place for less than 3 years. And Ben, if you'll advance the slide. David Donaldson was instrumental in registering the standards for the K-12 teaching occupation in November of 2021. It's important to note that the registered apprenticeship in the K-12 teaching occupation is the fastest growing apprenticeship in the history of registered apprenticeship, over 100 years. So we know that starting in mid-January of 2022, when the Tennessee Department of Ed led the first registered apprenticeship. In May of 2022, West Virginia was the second registered apprenticeship with a high school pathway. Since that time, we now know that over 37 states or territories have registered apprenticeship in teaching programs. So this is a movement that is transforming how teachers are prepared in our nation. And we want to make sure that we are making effective, highly prepared teachers to enter the teacher workforce. We want to provide you additional information. So in the chat, my colleagues will put some information for you, a link to our website, as well as a link to an Apprenticeship 101 webinar that will provide you some additional information. If you're interested in learning more about apprenticeships in teaching, I encourage you to watch our LinkedIn. We'll give you the link here at the end of the webinar. We will be posting 3 webinars with 9 state education agency individuals in November for National Apprenticeship Week. Will be November 19th, 20th, and 21st. So please watch for those registrations to be released this Friday. We'd love to have you join us for those webinars and learn how different states are approaching registered apprenticeship. But we also invite you to join the second national convening on registered apprenticeships in teaching. This conference is co-hosted by NASTEC and the National Center for Grow Your Own, and will be in Austin, Texas, January 29th through the 31st. I will tell you that registration is filling up very quickly, but an excellent opportunity to learn from all facets of registered apprenticeship. So I'm going to toss it over to my colleague, Linda, and she's going to give you some background for AAQEP before we get started with questions.
Thank you so much, Carla. Really appreciate this opportunity to give this approach to accreditation that AAQEP has started. And on the next slide, I'm going to talk just a little bit about, if you'd forward that for me, thank you, reframing our professions conversation. That's where we started with AAQEP. I'm looking at 2017, 45 different professionals from the field across different states really went into 3 working groups. You can see those working groups there, the expectations about the standards and evidence, the process, really looking at how do we maximize collaboration, and the consistency, how can we be absolutely positive that we're looking at this information across the board for all. That led us into our vision and mission, which is really, as anyone would expect for an accreditor, really thinking about evidence-based improvement and engaging the P20 system and changing the mindset a little bit from our public so that we are holding high public confidence. And on the next slide, we're talking a little bit about what that high public confidence starts looking like. We started with design principles that became operational principles. And the first one on this slide is about collaboration, because that is the one that we hear all the time from our members. So they love the collaboration. They love the opportunity to work together, to really think about all these opportunities for innovation, the opportunities continuing on with partnerships, and then also thinking about the comprehensiveness of it. It's not only the institutions, though that's definitely an important part, but really thinking about more of the different ways, the alternative ways, the different paradigms that we're thinking about for educator preparation. We continue these principles on the next slide, which is the top one there, context. That's the one that's extremely important, again, to all of our members. You have a specific context as a provider, and it really does make a difference in what is your mission? What is it that you are really thinking about, and what concerns you? That leads into having that consistency for everyone in our process, and then continuing with the efficiency, because we want to make certain that it is that you're able to really join us with this. And then finally, going back to that one where we're talking about how do we really support each other, but the sharing of some of the books that we've written and some of the materials that we have also. So thinking about the context on the next slide, you can see where we really are very diverse. It's not only the EPP members that are in a few of the states, we're across the nation and in different jurisdictions. But the column on the right talks about the diversity of the providers that we have. Every one of those bullets shows up and is an example of a population that is a member of AAQEP. So we're pretty open. We've intentionally designed a system that is very flexible. Looking at the next slide, the framework is really thinking about on and to the next on those that four square. The 2018 standards have 4 standards to them. Each one of the standards would have 6 aspects, and you can check into that a little bit more in our guide that's on our website. But when you think about these standards, the completer performance, candidate completer performance, that's standard 1 and 2. And we're thinking about a lot of data there. And education preparation, we're accustomed to collecting that data. But standards 3 and 4 then are talking about program practice and how do we really ensure that the programs have the capacity not only to sustain and build their programs and really support the educators that are coming through those programs and completing the programs, but looking at what's happening when we're looking at the field, looking at the entire P20 education field. So those are 2018 standards, and each one has 6 aspects, and you can find those on our website. But we're also looking at our bylaws that say we have to revisit those standards every 7 years. And so we have 2025 standards that are ready to be published in January of 2025. The link is there for you to look at those at any point. But there's an implementation timeline because, you know, when you're changing all those standards, it can get a little bit uncomfortable sometimes. So we have this really well-defined implementation timeline helping people to determine which set of standards am I going to use and what do they look like. But there, when we look at the next one, there's a code on the next slide. It's a QR code that can help you to look at that draft. Now, the draft's pretty close to being what's going to be presented to the board in December of 2024. And that's so that they can give us the approval to move forward and then present that and publish it in January of 2025. So a great opportunity for you to grab that QR code, look at that draft, and then think about where do we want to go with that. But one of the things that we talk about is the process, and those are the different pathways. AAQEP has designed 2 different pathways. One is a 5-year initial accreditation, and the other one is the 7-year accreditation that's very common for accreditors. The 5-year initial accreditation is a maximum of those 5 years, and it is one time only. We do have a webinar coming up. As a matter of fact, it's going to be tomorrow. And that webinar is talking about the initial accreditation pathway. You can see the link there on the slide. The 7-year accreditation is the maximum of 7 years. It's recurring. It's the one that if you decide to do the IAR, then you'll move right forward into the 7-year accreditation. It also comes with a program performance review. But having talked about that, we'll look at those in a little more detail about some commonalities. The 5-year initial accreditation and the 7-year accreditation both require a local practitioner that bring the context, the understanding of what's happening with the local. And then there's a small team. We intentionally, remember, we have that frugality in there. There's this small team with a small footprint. One thing that is very different about AAQEP accreditation is that there's no judgment or recommendations by the team. They really are just there to collect and affirm the evidence and be a colleague, that third party. So we're talking about that. It's very timely virtual decision. And that's okay to move on. Thank you so much, Ben. If we can move on to the next slide, because we have a lot of supports in place. When you're thinking about your membership dues, you're thinking, where do these dues go? And what we do is we intentionally have built out a lot of complementary member resources and support. Monthly cohort calls. You'll have an opportunity to talk with people from around the nation and even ask questions about what kind of evidence did you use for standard 4E? What did you do with that rubric? Do you have any observation forms? So a great professional learning community, and we really can learn from each other. We also have collaborative conversations. We have member quarterlies and open forums. But the one that we really appreciate is that on the next slide, that would be our webinars. So there's a system of webinars that really talk about the entire sequence, along with these additional resources that would be our consulting, our symposium, our workshops, our institute. And then the really important one is open to anyone. You can do some research about the member resources, go in and check out what's available for you on that website. So the member resources is an extremely important one for everyone. Lots of information there, including the webinars, all of these sample QARs, things like that we make available for you. So we're on social media. There's no question about that. Not only is AAQEP on social media, but Mark and I are both on social media. And I have to say that really is, thank you so much, Carla, for this opportunity to talk about AAQEP. And I'm going to turn it back over to you to kind of tie all those pieces together with some questions for all of us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Linda. So today our discussion will center around 4 overarching themes: accreditation and quality insurance, innovative pathways and flexibility, data and continuous improvement, and institutional collaboration. So we're going to start with topic 1, jumping in to discuss accreditation and quality assurance. And let's get started with this first question. How can registered apprenticeship programs align with AAQEP standards and accreditation processes?
All right, let me find the unmute there. Thank you. Thank you, Carla. And I just have to say, you and Linda did the hardest thing on the webinar already. You got through those presentations so quickly. So thank you so much for that background. I think the structure of a registered apprenticeship program aligns very well with our standards, because the focus in accreditation these days, and certainly the focus for AAQEP accreditation, is on performance, is on outcomes. And so that 2,000 hours of opportunity to be engaged in learning on the job gives so many opportunities for performance. And what we look for in our evidence for our first two standards is evidence from on-the-job performance that aligns with the the aspects of the standards, but also for the field, the folks who are working with candidates in the field to give that feedback. So the journey worker in this case would be a key person given feedback, of course, formatively, but also programmatically as well.
Right. Linda, do you have anything to add to that?
So I really don't have anything to add, because Mark he just encapsulates all of it so well. So I'm gonna let that stand. So thank you.
Okay. And one of the things that I would just add, when we think about registered apprenticeship programs aligning with accreditation, with AAQEP standards, that we know that in registered apprenticeships, we are looking at a competency-based. Generally, with teacher registered apprenticeship, we are looking at a competency-based program, and that aligns naturally with looking what AAQEP is looking for, demonstrating outcomes and measurable impacts. So a teacher registered apprenticeship program is structured around real-world skills, and AAQEP aligns well with that because they have expectations for preparation and educator effectiveness.
And Carla, I'll just add one little comment around that. Accreditation requires multiple sources of information from multiple perspectives, but one of the things that our system does require is direct measures of performance in the field. And for some types of programs, that's the toughest to get. I think a registered apprenticeship program has a huge advantage there in terms of the availability and accessibility of that type of information.
Sure. And one of the things that we look at as well is that both AAQEP and registered apprenticeships emphasize that there are flexible pathways and multiple entry points. And in a teacher registered apprenticeship, when I was speaking about the Grow Your Own earlier, a teacher registered apprenticeship can be designed to meet the local context of the community needs. So if you have a paraprofessional who has no college experience and you want to support them to enter at a high school diploma and move toward an associate's degree, you could have a multiple entry points where an individual could enter with 60 hours of credit and complete a pathway, or complete a bachelor's degree or a post-baccalaureate degree. So a registered apprenticeship can be designed to support those multiple entry points, and then the AAQEP process allows for those flexible pathways into the teaching career, and ultimately allow us to diversify the educator workforce by meeting the specific needs of that community.
I think that's so important, Carla, because that's really with AAQEP, with the flexible pathways, that makes such a difference, especially if you can do the initial accreditation pathway to start with. If you have that opportunity in your state, then you could really look at how are you building this and scaffolding it, and start thinking about how are you collecting the evidence, as you move forward through that process. It really does help you to scaffold it into that strong accreditation process.
Agreed.
And I'll just throw out one real quick comment, Carla. We see among many of our members that they have portfolios of multiple pathways within a single organization, and I know that some of them are looking at adding registered apprenticeships as part of their portfolio programs in order to provide just that maximum set of opportunities for folks to enter the teaching profession. And so we have providers that have a Grow Your Own working with paraprofessionals program alongside of a master's level entry into teaching program alongside of a traditional undergraduate program. So this isn't uncommon territory for us at all. We're eager to work with folks, bringing a number of opportunities to folks so that they can enter the teaching profession.
Sure. And those flexible pathways really support our mission, and that is to reduce barriers. Of course, financial barriers are the barrier that we most often discuss, but there are lots of other barriers that keep an individual from successfully becoming a teacher. So, by providing that flexibility, we're going to attract a more diverse workforce into towards teacher licensure. So, thank you for that opportunity. So,
Well, I'm also going to say this about the data collection and about that improvement process is that how important that is, because, when we have, new pathways coming, like with the Grow Your Own, there's an opportunity then to really use the accreditation process to show that they are looking at how do they collect the data? How do they really put in place a continuous improvement process and not feel like they're locked into a specific model only, that they really can make some adjustments and adaptations and have that innovation show, the quality of what they're doing.
what role do you think when we're talking about those supports, whether they're wraparound supports or removing barriers, what role does mentorship and on-the-job learning play? We know what role they play in a registered apprenticeship, but how does that align with the role they would play in demonstrating competencies required by AAQEP?
The mentor, the person in the mentor role is actually one of the perspectives that we name as being necessary. In other words, you have to know what folks are seeing in the field and what colleagues in the field are seeing in terms of performance as a part of that. So they play a completely central role across the board.
Absolutely. And in the apprenticeship role, the journey worker is critical to the success of the apprentice. So that's a beautiful marriage between the assessment that AAQEP requires as well as the apprenticeship competency accomplishment.
Yeah, and one of the values of really, our model, I believe, is that it's not just collecting information, and really looking at the results of surveys, from the mentors, and even from other supervisors that may be in the field with them. But it's using that data. How do we use the data? And then how do we communicate that we use the data? How do we communicate that back? So it really does build those partnerships and strengthens and gives a strong foundation for the partnerships to not just exist with the survey, but really to, build the foundation to continue that work.
Absolutely. I want to stop for just a moment and check the question and answer. I don't want to get too far ahead. If you'll just take a look with me and see if there are any questions we want to answer. How are institutions aligning coursework with the program? And instead of aligning, I should say providing, what modalities, etc.
I think one thing we're seeing is that as multiple pathways are added within a single provider or added in general, modalities do vary. And happily, that's something we all became a little bit more comfortable with since the pandemic. I don't ever want to say anything good came out of the pandemic because it was a horrible experience, but we sort of got over ourselves in terms of using a variety of modalities. And so I think it does vary. You might find more distance things, you find more asynchronous things, with the idea of taking away all the barriers to learning. An apprentice or anyone preparing to be a teacher isn't necessarily learning a whole lot about what they need to do by driving an hour and a half to get to a class and driving an hour and a half back, right? If they can use modalities that allow them to maximize their learning time in the most flexible way. So we are seeing that. So it might mean offering things through more than one approach if you have more than one pathway that you're working with at an EPP.
And I would also add to that it's very critical for the sponsor and the related instruction provider to be stakeholders engaged in this conversation, because it's very important to align that curriculum based on the needs of that community. I know in West Virginia, I created a youth apprenticeship model, which was a high school to college model. So it was very important to engage stakeholders in that work to determine what courses were accepted at partner institutions, what courses were required at partner institutions, and that took a lot of stakeholder engagement. And I believe it's still ongoing, to be honest with you. What are some items of evidence that providers are using for the program?
I think the range of evidence would include things like surveys to find out how things are going, but also rating forms, observation forms, some that are created locally, some that might be the forms that school districts are already using to look at and evaluate and provide feedback. But of course, especially in the feedback mode during the course of the program. Also, if there's related instruction being provided, that probably includes some kind of evaluation as well to show that it's being successfully completed and folks are learning what they do. So the full range. Accreditation tends to be very eclectic in terms of what sources of evidence are used and also the perspectives. And so, our framework says, well, you need more than one source of evidence to be confident of a finding in anything, and it should come from more than one perspective, so that you got different people taking a look at the growth and performance of the apprentice in this case.
Yeah, and an opportunity to get those different perspectives really is using that qualitative research method. Thinking about, how do we, not just with surveys, but maybe do some interviews or some focus groups. Because, you really can do the focus groups and people are comfortable doing those on Zoom now. It makes a difference. You don't have to bring everyone into the room at the same time anymore. There's also an opportunity to do some case studies, or some longitudinal studies with this. I think it's a great chance to, that we're putting forth here, for some of the grow your own programs to really look at this, for long term to see exactly what is happening. So that's information that can be presented because, again, we follow that improvement science model. So it can be that they could be presenting the information as they're moving through the cycle of accreditation.
Excellent, thank you. Does AAQEP ask or require EPPs to disaggregate completers by those who enrolled in an apprenticeship model, or are those completers just added to the traditional pathways? Good question.
Yeah, and thank you, Susan, for that question. There are there's a general principle that AAQEP applies. Sorry, I hesitate in answering there. The answer is yes. Disaggregation is what we like to see, and not just for apprenticeship models, but any differences in modality, mode of delivery, or pattern in the preparation. We require people to disaggregate that so that you get a clear picture of the relative performance and the maximum opportunity to learn from what's going well. If you see great outcomes in one type of program, you say, well, gee, how did that happen? How can we learn from that? And maybe different patterns across them. So yes, disaggregation is a fundamental part of our system.
So the next question asks if there's a national apprenticeship completion rate and how many apprentices successfully pass the state licensure exam. And I would say that data is very early because the registered apprenticeship in K-12 teaching has only been in place since November of 2021, less than 3 years. So I'm not sure that there are longitudinal studies that are available to our knowledge, but I think that you could compare how these apprenticeship completion rates are aligned to teacher residencies. How have you seen IHE's linked competencies demonstrated in the apprenticeship with coursework requirements?
We see those. I've seen examples. Thinking of one set of meetings I've been in with some folks from Pennsylvania. Seen that linkage happen pretty naturally. You say, well, what are the list of things that we're after? Map those over into what's in the courses. Usually, the state standards and state expectations for teachers are a common linking point there. So that's a crosswalk that folks do, and it's a good way to ensure that all the things folks are going to need to know when they are licensed and practicing in the state, right? That they've got the background that matches up with those requirements. So that kind of crosswalk is very typically done.
So it seems that GYO programs might have a nice entry into accreditation because they can more easily track their candidates into full-time positions. Thoughts?
I think that's absolutely true. Absolutely true. Yeah. One of the hardest things for other models of preparation is to, depending on how much support they get from a state, is to follow completers, to follow their graduates and be able to get the look back information and the follow-up information that you want. So grow your own programs, registered apprenticeship programs are ideally situated in order to ensure that very full, rich set of data and the kind of feedback that you need in order to engage in ongoing program improvement.
And it really makes a difference because they're automatically in that point where they're supporting them. So that really helps a great deal also, because that is one of our standards, to ensure that, the candidates are not just put out into the field as completers, and there's no follow-up support to keep them. That retention, as we all know, the best way to recruit is to retain. And so that retention really does make a difference, and having that support system in place does help a great deal.
Please continue. Thank you for those great questions. Please continue to add questions to the chat. Any questions that we run out of time to answer, we certainly will get those answered for you after the webinar. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our second topic, innovative pathways and flexibilities. So Mark and Linda, how does AAQEP ensure that innovative approaches like apprenticeships maintain high standards for teacher quality and preparation? This is a question that we often hear at the National Center for Grow Your Own. What are some of the innovative approaches you are seeing?
One of, as Linda mentioned in the slides, one of the principles that we operate under is that we want the system to work for everyone. And that means having the same standards, the same flexible set of data requirements. And I know using the words flexible and requirements in the same sentence may seem odd to people. But when you stay focused on what the outcomes are that you want, then you can say, well, there's more than one way to show that. And we look for the multiple ways to show it. So we've worked successfully. What I should say is providers with a very wide variety of models have taken a look at our standards and documented their performance with them and achieved accreditation. So, we've had Grow Your Own programs that are working with parapros who are coming through. We've had sort of standalone programs that are not based at IHEs. Of course, many higher ed based programs, the bulk of our members are coming through that kind of model. But even within our higher education based programs, we have residencies, we have transition to teaching programs, we have a lot of career changer programs. So the nice thing about the standards, and in a sense, this was an experiment we undertook in putting the framework together to say, can this be useful to the wide variety of providers and wide variety of models that now constitute the landscape of educator preparation? And so far, the answer is yes, including community college-based programs, district-based programs, because as you know, states across the nation are assisting in the creation of or creating policies that allow for the creation of very different models and approaches. And so far, we've found our system to test out very well against all of them.
So Mark, what flexibility within AAQEP accreditation standards for programs that are integrating non-traditional pathways such as registered apprenticeships exist?
I think the key thing is to look at our standards and see that the main focus is on completer outcomes, right? Regardless of what pathway you're going through, you got to make sure that you have a way of knowing that the candidates have the knowledge they need in relation to their state teaching certificate, that they understand pedagogy and are able to implement teaching, that they can actually perform in the classroom, that they understand assessment and differentiation. So everyone is going after the same things there and finding ways to document it, whichever model of preparation they're doing. And then on the program practices side, the key thing is, do you have a system set up in place so that you're learning from what you're finding in your data, and so that you're providing the support for the candidates that you need? And even though different model programs will do that in very different ways, those are the commonalities. And I think that's where we're finding the flexibility. So if you can come up with a better way to do it, we always tell our members, if anybody comes up with a better way to do something, do it, document it, and share it with us all, so we all learn from it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, one of the things that I when I was working with teacher candidates, and they would be concerned because they obviously in every state has their own standards that they would have to teach to, and I would tell them, but they gave you the standards. They didn't tell you how to teach it, and so we really have to think about that. And I think that's really a lot of the flexibility also within the entire, accreditation process that we have, is that it's the how sometimes that really reaches to the context.
I know that you touched upon this in your PowerPoint presentation, Linda, but would you like to say anything else about the upcoming changes to the standards and how that will support registered apprenticeship in terms of demonstrating continuous improvement and candidate readiness?
Yeah, the changes are not quite as broad as what people start thinking about, like, oh my gosh, they're going to change the standards. There's some key points that really were integrated into it, some minor changes that were, and maybe more in the verbiage itself, okay, that really tried to clarify some of it. There are a couple key areas that, were brought in. There was the technology, the wellness factor, and then also more of the special needs. Those are some of the key points that were brought in. But I'm going to pop this over to Mark also, because he's been working very closely with that particular committee that really, developed and revised these standards. So Mark, I'm sure you understand why I popped this one to you.
I'll add, yeah, and
deeply immersed.
I'll
Yeah.
just add one thing to what Linda said. Part of the feedback we got on our original standards was, well, first of all, most of the feedback was very positive, and then feedback to address some issues that have become more salient since they were put together. But another thing we did here was make sure that you frame the process side, the program practices side, in such a way so that it doesn't sound like everybody is at an IHE. In other words, make the language fit for institutions of higher education, but don't make it sound like everybody is one. And so we took that to heart. We spent a lot of time, one of our colleagues in particular, Karen Lone, Senior Director of Member Services, really led us in our thinking about that. So I think folks will find that our new standards are written in a way that is very open and doesn't presume any one type of structure or organization, right? Key thing being on processes to make sure that there's quality and the candidates are supported. Those are the themes on that side. And I think folks will find that language very inviting and very, very flexible and very open.
Great, thank you. I think in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and move to section 3, and then we'll stop for some additional questions. Please continue to add any questions you have to the chat, and we will love to address those. So looking at data and continuous improvement, I know that my interactions with the educator preparation providers that I worked with while I was working at the Department of Education, they're very concerned about making sure that they have the data they need to meet accreditation benchmarks. So how can an apprenticeship program aligning with the AAQEP requirements use data to demonstrate continuous improvement to meet your accreditation benchmarks?
I think the main moves to make are to take a look at the standards, and I think you'll find that the standards align with what the goals for most programs are anyway. And then to think, go through and do a little check on what data you're already collecting. Think about what supplemental data you might have. And we have AAQEP has a variety of resources on our website and a variety of events that we can help that can help guide folks into thinking about doing that. But the main thing is just get a plan, start gathering data, keep going, and make sure that you're gathering data that answers your questions as well, right? The things that you care about.
Right, absolutely. So it really makes a difference that this is for your benefit, that's important. But one of the things also is, we follow an improvement science model. And that improvement science model says that, you put something in place and you can do, you can look at the data in 90 days or 180 days or one semester or whatever. But for us, we also say that sometimes you need to make some revisions and some changes in that data and that collection. So you might want to put a plan in place. Give us the plan of exactly how you're going to review that, what you're going to do, some changes that are going to be involved, who's going to be involved, what's your timeline, a very basic action plan to put those steps in place. And so it means that you might not have all of it as clearly defined as what Carla said earlier. Maybe the grow your own is a little bit early. As in collecting some of that data. So what's your plan in order to collect that data and who's involved?
I'll just add one other thing. We also offer the ability for folks to write a proposal that says, here's how we're thinking about putting our data together. And then you can send that in, and we get a couple of peer reviewers to take a look at that and to give feedback. So there's lots of formative structures in place to help folks out.
And I think I would add to align with teacher registered apprenticeship. When I think of a traditional educator preparation program, a lot of your data comes from your supervising teacher or your cooperating teacher in a residency. So in a registered apprenticeship, there's an opportunity to collect data from multiple avenues, from the apprentice, from the journey worker mentor, from supervisors, from program administrators, that perhaps may give a more comprehensive view of the effectiveness and efficacy of the program that you're implementing.
Absolutely. And I think the very direct engagement on the part of the school or school district in a registered apprenticeship program probably incentivizes that more and leads to probably richer, more complete data. So my thinking is registered apprenticeship programs probably have some real natural advantages in terms of the thoroughness of the data collection.
Yeah, it really goes into those multiple measures with multiple perspectives with reasonable continuity.
Well, and if you think also about the question we had a few moments ago about what type of longitudinal data exist, and we know that we're 3 years in, and if you think back to May of 2022, when we had only 2 states in the nation who had teacher registered apprenticeships programs. For example, the program that I created, that first year was a pilot year, and so really it's only in its second year of full implementation. So those students haven't even graduated from college yet. So it definitely is a process, but I think part of that longitudinal data will be sustainment, retention, how many teachers get certified, how many teachers acquire a teaching position, how many teachers stay in that teaching position. So it's going to be really exciting to watch that longitudinal data develop as teacher apprenticeships grow across the nation.
But you know, Carla, that's exactly what we were talking about, though, is that you could be presenting the data that you do have, all right, and not necessarily have to make decisions based on that data, but then think, where do we need to go from here? And you just listed all those areas. That would be fantastic to start, you know, really thinking about what is all the data that we could be collecting, and what is our plan in order to collect that data? What are we going to do with it then?
And I think that's important, particularly for our educator preparation providers, because there's a feeling that you have to be able to show completer data. And there are so many metric points along this continuum that will show that you are moving towards sustaining a teacher pipeline through registered apprenticeship. Okay, we just have a couple of questions in the chat that we can hop over and look at really quickly before we head into our final topic. In your opinion, have you seen any programs develop at the course level that are considered exemplary? So from your lens as an accreditor, are you seeing any exemplars?
Because registered apprenticeships per se are so new, and as you say, still in the process of gathering data, I would have to say we have not seen them through the process already, because that's where they are. At the same time, we have accredited some residency programs that have some similarities to being very, very based and rooted, and other teacher of record programs. So we do pull out some things and make some resources available on our website that are actual extracts from cases, but in terms of registered apprenticeship programs, no, they're so new. We're still waiting for that. But what we will do is be on the lookout, and it is our practice to identify promising practices or exemplary practices, and ask folks to either present about them on webinars that we have, or to highlight them on websites. But it's the newness that's tripping us up here on that question, because it's a great question. I wish I had a different answer, but we gotta come back to it in a couple of years.
One of the things that I would encourage you, those of you who are interested in the answer to this question, I would encourage you to, if you want to go back to the institution that would have the most data at this point, I would encourage you to reach out to Austin Peay University, because Austin Peay University, with the Tennessee Department of Education as the sponsor, and Clarksville Montgomery Schools in Tennessee, were the first registered apprenticeship program in the nation. So I would encourage you to reach out. They would have what would be as close to longitudinal data as is available in the nation, just based on, as Mark said, the length of time. Dr. Prentice Chandler is no longer there, but there are individuals that would be able to support and provide you some numbers about the success that they had through that program.
In Tennessee, just a shout out, Tennessee and Austin Peay have been doing marvelous work in documenting their work and in sharing it. So
Yes.
Totally second that recommendation. Fantastic resources.
Yes, thank you. So what support does AAQEP offer to explore if accreditation is a good next step for our quality assurance practice?
Linda and I are both unmuted and going after this one.
Okay.
So I'll just say, I'll just say, call Linda. No, seriously, Linda, in our division of labor, Linda works with institutions that are exploring their options, thinking about it. We have webinars, like an introductory webinar you can come to. But if what you need is a conversation, Linda, or if she passes it off to any other one of us, are happy to go through that. So I'd say look at our website, take a look at our standards, take a look at all the resources. But if it comes down to wanting just sort of individual and personalized conversation, we're more than happy to engage in that.
Yeah, I meet with people all the time so that I can walk them through what I call a cost transition timeline even. So that what does it cost in order to make this transition, whether it's new to AAQEP or you're transitioning from another accreditor. So exactly what does it cost and what is the timeline and how I can do that? And what are the resources available for us, in order to understand how to move forward with that? We have a lot of resources available. Membership dues go directly to creating those resources. So just give me a call or send me an email or a text, either one.
Yeah, we'll have all that contact information. It looks like quality clinical experiences in AAQEP's framework would align with apprenticeships. Does AAQEP define clinical experiences or require anything specific? Does NCGYO require anything specific?
From the AAQEP side, we require that there be supported mentorship, right? That there be a supported, mentored clinical experience that aligns with the with the license that's being sought. But beyond that, the way it's structured, the way it's set up, needs to conform to state requirements. But the main thing is, as long as you're in the right kind of classroom that you're going to be practicing in, and you've got the right people supporting you, you're good to go. No more definition than that.
And
yeah, the only thing I'll add to that, if you don't mind, Carla, just for a second, okay, is that one of the things that from the perspective of those clinical experiences is to ensure that that really is an effective partnership. And so how do you really think about that, and how do you collect any data with that? And that could be the qualitative research methods. It could be something else that you're using in order to collect that data. But how do you know that it's effective, that it really is, that the support system really is there for those clinical experiences?
Well, and one of the states that we work with in Nebraska actually uses their clinical practice rubrics as their statewide on-the-job competencies. So there's a direct alignment in their statewide apprenticeship standards. And, of course, as Mark mentioned, just as it is with your accreditation work with the registered apprenticeship, the requirement from the U.S. Department of Labor is that there is a strong journey worker apprentice relationship. So that is a requirement. The ideal journey worker ratio to an apprentice is a 1-to-1 ratio. And so that is a requirement from the U.S. Department of Labor. So having that strong level of support is mandatory as well in that. Okay, in a registered apprenticeship, the employer takes on a lot of initial costs. This affects the willingness for employers to rethink their participation. Where should we seek additional support in creating a sustainable program? Well, that's a different webinar, but I would encourage you to go to the National Center for Grow Your Own's website. We do have webinar resources, and we do have a webinar on funding that will support you. But that's a great question. One of the, in a snapshot in our limited amount of time today, there are multiple funding streams. Reaching out to your workforce development boards, your legislature, your State Department of Ed, your title monies, your Department of Labor. We just supported 4 states to pull down over $23 million that will support teacher registered apprenticeships through the State Apprenticeship Expansion Formula Funding Grant Opportunity, which actually will have 3 more years. And that was there's a base funding grant and a competitive funding grant. So would love to have more conversations about that with you, about what that funding looks like. But through that funding, you are able to reduce or remove the cost to support a sustainable program. There are policies being put forth in legislatures all over the country that are supporting the sustainable funding of teacher registered apprenticeships. The WIOA funding, workforce innovation funding through your workforce development boards support sustainability of programs. And that is a very critical question to the success of a registered apprenticeship. So would love to have more conversations about that with you offline, or point you to some additional resources. We have one more topic that we want to shoot through, and then we'll take any additional questions. Thank you for sticking with us as we move through. So institutional collaboration is the last topic that we wanted to touch on today in our webinar. So how could EPPs leverage their partnership with AAQEP to enhance the structure of an apprenticeship program?
I think the main benefit that working with an accreditor would bring in that context is just a framework for looking at the data together and ensuring that the processes are in place to support ongoing improvement. My belief is that anytime we're engaged in something and we stop, we take a look and we invite some friends in to look with us, that's where we do a lot of learning. And that's really what the accreditation process is. You stop with your close partners, you take a look at your data, you analyze, you come to some conclusions, and then you invite in some further more distant partners. So the review team that comes in and takes a look and asks a few more different questions that increases your learning in that way. And then the validation that comes with when yet a third group of professional partners, the Accreditation Commission, takes a look. So I think engaging in that process together actually helps frame that collective work together to ensure quality.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that AAQEP does offer, those monthly cohort meetings. So that's a great opportunity then to, share across the nation and really think about, okay, well, how did I do this, or can I do that, or what's a different way to do this, and do you have this form or this rubric, or how did you collect the evidence for this standard? Really thinking about, what's a different way to approach this, and sharing that information across those cohorts.
And there's no limit to how many people you can bring. I mean, I suppose there's kind of a practical limit, but whether it's the related instruction provider or whether it's the hosting district, the employer, right? You could have people from a couple different points of view come to those cohorts, hear what other folks across the country are doing, ask the questions, and get that support. So as a sounding board, they're tremendously powerful.
Excellent. Any best practices that you would like to talk about as we conclude here in just a few minutes for documenting and integrating apprenticeship work into the overall accreditation review?
There's sort of two approaches that I can think of. If it's an ed prep provider, a university that's already engaged in educator preparation that is now working in an apprenticeship model, I think that means there's a lot of experience with data gathering and instrument development and all that can be leveraged and brought into it. But also always important to respect that pathway as its own pathway and to look at it in its own integrity. For brand new partnerships, I think accreditation becomes a great framework to say, gee, let's get together and put a proposal together about what our quality assurance system is going to look like, about what assessments we're going to use. Let's get engaged in a cohort. Let's work together. So, in either case, it's a great support for developing. It's great support for adapting, and just great support for moving forward.
I would just add that as you start, depending on where you are in the process, whether you're just starting to learn about registered apprenticeships or whether they are fully embedded into your educator preparation program in your state, I just would encourage partnerships and building relationships. When I started this work in West Virginia, I was surprised at how much I didn't know about labor and how much labor didn't know about education. So those were ongoing relationships that were built over a period of years. It could be your CTE division, it could be your workforce development office, it could be your governor's office, your Department of Labor. All of those entities have different languages. They speak different languages. So having operational definitions, having a glossary of terms, and really having face-to-face opportunities over Zoom or in person. I really set up weekly meetings with my educator preparation providers, with my workforce development office, with the Department of Labor. And it really became a relationship building and supportive education of each other about the process, because your workforce development boards have a lot of experience with apprenticeships in other areas, but they do not have the education lens, and that's new. It's a new lens. It's a lens that requires a bachelor's degree. So there are all of those various pieces that require collaboration and partnership. So at the beginning of this webinar, we talked about the PK20 continuum, and that's really what this requires is partnership and collaboration from start to finish. Okay, I'm going to hop over here and see the last question. Does AAQEP consider apprenticeship as a program model or a delivery model or both?
That's a good question. I think the way I would answer would be to say, well, it's probably a program model. So if you're familiar with the AAQEP system, you know, your scope of accreditation is defined by the program specification table, where you list all the types of programs that you run. Now, delivery, it might be, you know, it might use the same delivery model as some of your other work. It might use a different delivery model. They all might use different mixes. So, but our focus would be on the program as a program model.
Thank you, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
Any final comments? We are at 4 o'clock and we have answered all the questions in the chat. Any final comments before we close out our webinar, Mark or Linda?
I'll just say that as we take a look at the landscape of educator preparation, I think the development of teacher registered apprenticeship programs is an exciting new development. It's great to see people engaging in it, and we're just eager to play whatever role we can play in supporting the ongoing learning that comes from engaging in quality assurance work. So, and so glad, Carla, that you and David and the whole set of colleagues at National Center for Grow Your Own are really leading the expansion of this work across the country. So it's incredibly exciting. You know, it's great to explore new opportunities. And so as questions come up, just please know that our ears and email boxes and phone lines are always open to continue the conversation.
Thank you, Mark and Linda. It's been a pleasure. I will end by just saying that our experience and my personal experience in my work, but our experience at the National Center for Grow Your Own is that it's not a situation where individuals don't want to be teachers. We have a lot of people out there who want to become teachers, but it's our responsibility to remove the barriers and put the supports in place so that they can reach that goal. I know that our founder speaks all the time about his mother, who was his cafeteria worker and his vacation Bible school teacher, and had years and years of experience and wanted to be a teacher, but did not have the opportunities and the financial support to do that. And I think that I've seen that repeated over and over and over across this country. So on behalf of the Association for Advancing Quality in Educator Preparation and the National Center for Grow Your Own, we will share our contact slide in our last few moments here. Thank you for spending the last hour with us, diving deeper into understanding of the educator preparation provider's role in the apprenticeship process and its impact on the future of teacher preparation through registered apprenticeships. We consider your time a gift, and please reach out if we can provide any additional support. Have a great afternoon.